one of the biggest challenges that we continuously hear from the community is maintaining relationships in a virtual environment has its challenges, but that isn't the biggest obstacle. It is establishing new relationships. That's the challenge. Julio, I'm going to start with you. How do you, how can you kind of talk about and address how to successfully establish new KOL relationships in this virtual environment?
Sure, Samuel. So when we're looking at this, it's either sometimes we look at it from a new MSL in the territory or an existing MSL that's trying to expand their reach within the territory. I think the same principles still apply. If it's a new MSL, there may be resources still within the organization that can help you transition over to that KOL. So if somebody's been promoted, it's utilizing that person that was in the territory before. If you have someone that's coming in new to the organization, it's really being knowing who else within the organization has that relationship within the organization. With the KOL. So who else is really touching that KOL and can introduce you? And then also, even within our network that we know of KOLs, can a KOL introduce you to a different KOL? I think it's really utilizing those resources, but I think in the end, to establish or to maintain those relationships, it's important to bring back value to them. One of the things that's important, and I would always tell my MSLs, is you really have to earn the right for the next meeting. And how do we earn the right? Is by providing value. So it's utilizing your resources that you have within your organization. And I think that's why it makes it really more important to be coordinated as a medical affairs team. And then even outside of medical affairs are there any other departments that may have that relationship with the KOL, even if it's a commercial colleague or an HEOR colleague or somebody outside of your medical affairs umbrella that can help you introduce you to that KOL, and then really bringing that value back and earning the right for the next meeting.
Yep, I love that. Earning the right. Love that. And, I always talk about MSLs, the success of any MSL begins and ends at adding value to KOL. You don't do that, you fail. So it's even critically more important during virtual. Nicole, any thoughts on this, on how to successfully establish new KOL relationships in a virtual environment?
Yes, and you're right. I mean, I'm glad that this got brought up because this is an incredibly challenging thing to do when you're not in front of a person, right? It's a little more difficult in the virtual environment. Everything Julio said is on point. Everything you just said about bringing value is absolutely critical. I think that also brings up the need to make meetings more thoughtful and planned out and regimented almost. Some other colleagues that I've spoken with have mentioned that KOLs expect to stay on schedule. And because of this virtual environment and because they're getting pulled, they may have less time for scientific exchange. So, it's just really important to be, even more important, I think, to be respectful of their time and kind of bring value within that specific framework as well. Something that we also talk about is this idea that because we're virtual, we can be more efficient with we have opportunities to be more efficient with our targeting. So whereas before we may have been targeting very specific individuals because of the potential impact that they could have because, they're completely aligned with the way that they give presentations or publish or their research interests, it's possible now to utilize their network or utilize, like Julio was saying, our company's internal network to identify individuals that could help bring everybody together to help establish those new relationships. So we could tap into that. And then once we do, I just really want to emphasize how critical it is to bring value and be thoughtful and planned out to respect their time.
Yep. I agree. Excellent points. Bruno, any comments on this in terms of how to successfully establish new relationships?
The only thing I would add to all the good points is that social media is critical, but it's tricky. And what I see is that among our customers is that active listening in social media is essential to gradually build that relationship. We cannot have missed, for example, an important tweet from Dr. Smith. But we have to do it without stalking, right? And so it has to be gradual, and it's an interesting art that is going to be increasingly critical. To me, LinkedIn, of course, again without stalking, Twitter, and so it's going to be super interesting to see how Clubhouse becomes a place. I believe it will be. That's my prediction here. I think Clubhouse is going to be a super interesting place to see how KOL talk among themselves and sort of establish their digital opinion leader position on Clubhouse. So I think everybody should get on Clubhouse to make sure we understand that new incredible platform.
Yep. And for everybody on the call, Bruno is actually a major shareholder of Clubhouse. No, I'm just kidding.
Of course.
No,
Yes.
I agree with you. All right, so we